Enough! Get me the damn maid!
As the years go by and current hardware becomes increasingly incompatible with the past, the first Gothic gets harder and harder to play, making it the perfect target for a remake. The 2001 RPG is a cult classic for a reason, ahead of its time in world building and nuanced NPC interactions. While Gothic 1 Remake pulls the original into the near modern era in terms of presentation and controls, it doesn't touch much else. This is a mixed blessing. It's great because Gothic already forces a higher level of engagement and immersion out of those who play it, refusing to hold your hand in a way that still resonates in 2026. But its own sparks of brilliance are regularly challenged by the poor quality of its main story, its inconsistent pacing of the quests, and shallow combat, and none of that has changed either. Ironically named the hero, you'll spend much of the first half of Gothic feeling like anything but. From the moment you were dumped into the Colony, a work camp and open-air prison surrounded by a magical one-way barrier, you are met with tribulations as grand as the complicated political climate that the survivors here live in, and as small as tiny critters that can one-shot you in combat if you're not careful. The remake's best upgrade is easily how it looks and sounds. Gothic had a unique style even back in 2001. It was the definition of doing a lot with a little, thanks to low-poly models with muddy details arranged and colored in ways that really evoke the sense of place many bigger budget games did. The forests have big trees that block out the light from the sun, which is a huge contrast to the brick-and-mortar ruins where people are making their new lives. All of this has been enhanced with modern lighting and models that make old castles and caves of the valley seem like real places. The grassy and rocky lands that make up the uncivilized spaces between the colony settlements look verdant and appropriately wild now. The audio design was always strong too, especially in the sound effects and ambient nature noises. All of those are more robust than ever, even if the droning background music selection isn't all that special. But the best enhancement is the completely revoiced script. The original Gothic had some abysmal voice acting, and this remake does a great job of upping the bar to at least good.
It is what it is, as you mortals say when not busy prematurely dying.
Despite the visual upgrades, Gothic is still fairly buggy. It was rare that I ever straight up crashed, but more common were weird AI behaviors. Sometimes I took a bunch of monsters watching me run past them without any reaction whatsoever as a win, counterbalanced by all the times I had to load a past save because an NPC that I was supposed to follow got stuck, the quest I needed to finish trapped with him. For a solid chunk of Act 3, an NPC I had to recruit for a quest just followed me around aimlessly. That poor ore digger has seen things no man should. Gothic's difficulty is baked into its design in ways that aren't simply enemies that hit you hard. It starts with how little you are even told about how to play. The remake does you a favor that the original didn't, including a small glossary of important controls for how to do basic things like pick up items or attack with bows. Otherwise, most of what you learn comes from trial and error. For instance, the lockpicking minigame, though not overly difficult to understand, is something you just have to throw yourself against until you get it, even if it means wasting a ton of picks. Thankfully, the modernized control scheme and the inclusion of controller support help sand down some of the early game edges that came from a basic inability to interact with the world around you correctly, which does get you off the blocks into the ore mining rat race more quickly. Combat also benefits from the revamped controls, making it easier to swing at and hit enemies. This does not make combat easier overall, however, which is just as dangerous as it was 25 years ago. Your hero still starts off weak, and even lowly mole rats can send you to the game over screen in a hit or two. Leveling gets you learning points you can spend at trainers to raise your stats, which goes a small but gradual way towards making you dangerous in your own right. Once you get stronger gear, you stand a better chance, but weapons of any real note can be a big investment early, and armor even more so. The latter being the biggest factor in surviving more than a few blows. You'll be pretty bad at handling any weapon you pick up without training. Untrained, you clutch a short sword with both hands for dear life, flailing awkwardly with every swing, while trained attacks can flow into combos with proper timing and can critically hit enemies. This is a fun example of a game's storytelling goals being met with both interactive and non-interactive elements at the same time. but it still means that melee combat feels bad for a large chunk of the early game, only getting better if you can scrounge together enough money and save up a couple levels worth of learning points to get trained. And even after that investment, while the act of swinging the sword feels better, the actual action never evolves beyond standing in front of bad guys and bashing them until you or they are dead. Leaning on ranged attacks from a bow or crossbow is the safest and most costly early game option. And though training makes your shots more accurate over longer distances, it's an approach that evolves even less than melee. Magic does help both of these strategies, with offensive spells that are just better ranged attacks like this, or support options that can change the size of enemies, or summon monsters to help you out. Some of these spells can even have out-of-combat utility, like transforming yourself into a meat bug so that you can fit into small spaces. But magic doesn't become a real factor until the mid-game, and by then you're probably well invested in other skills and stats, making the pivot to a magic-based build a hard task unless you plan well in advance. You can learn all sorts of other skills that affect how you play, like investing in acrobatics so that you can take less fall damage but also get a dodge roll. Every time I made a big investment in a skill or equipment, these changes were noticeably impactful. I got stuck on a boss for a while, and when I finally decided to try out Remake's new branching armor paths, which allow you to improve armor in stages, it made the difference. But I often felt like I had to grind either to make the Gothic 1 remake feel good to play at all, or to just raise my stats so that I could endure cheesy enemy attacks for long enough to hit back. I never had to gain any actual skill, I just had to be more annoyingly determined than my enemies. I guess there's some sort of message there somewhere. Information about this world has to be teased out of it, either by talking to its denizens or picking up context clues from the environment. When agreeing to quests, don't expect objective markers to appear on your map to guide you. Hell, don't even expect a map at all unless you plan to buy or steal one first. Especially in the early hours, Gothic trains you to pay close attention to what you see and hear. It can feel daunting at first, trying to remember where specific NPCs are at certain times of day, or establish who the most important people are in town based on their jobs, or how other people talk about them. Your screens are free from the tooltip detritus of modern games of this ilk, but the reward for engaging with Gothic at this level is how great it felt every time I could navigate to a point of interest on a map based on memory and context clues alone.
Yeah, the smithy. Just take a look around. I'll wait here for a bit.
Unfortunately, the overall story of Gothic doesn't fulfill the promise of its great setting and world. The denizens of the mining colony have basically revolted and set up several micro-governments, each with their own hierarchy, economies, and organizational goals. You'll need to join in with one of the three camps early in order to get a stable foothold in the region and start working towards your own personal agenda. Each of these camps are unique from one another and present different social and moral quandaries that are really cool to exist among. The old camp is the largest and most established and does the most direct interaction with the outside world, but is also the most obviously corrupt. The Swamp Camp is a cult-led theocracy out in the wetlands filled with people who pray to a new forbidden god now that they're out of the reach of the mainland church. The new camp is a hodgepodge of people who don't want to live in the former camps and is largely a pretty ruthless meritocracy where the strong and capable can have whatever they want. I spent my playthrough getting into the good graces of the old camp, which meant impressing its leader Gomez enough to elevate me into his troop of personal guards. To do that, I had to spend a lot of time in the camp smoozing his people enough to vouch for me, which meant doing favors for them or catching their attention in other ways. It also meant navigating the social structure of the place, sometimes the hard way. Elite guards patrol different sections of the camp and run protection rackets for people in their districts. They would constantly try to shake me down for money in a it would be a shame if something happened to you kind of way. And more than once, co-conspirators would try to set you up to have that thing happen to you if you don't. They all have allegiances to their own paying customers, of course, so if you get into a fight in a place where you didn't pay a guard, but your opponent did, they will act accordingly. This attempt at immersion doesn't always land consistently though. While most citizens in these settlements are pretty vigilant against weird and potentially criminal behavior by you, it's easy to avoid any real consequences if you're caught. People will stop and make a fuss if you walk into a house uninvited, but so long as you leave before anyone starts swinging, everyone goes back to normal. I was caught more than once failing to pick the lock of someone's personal chest, but I just simply walked out of the room before they questioned me, and they never brought it up again. It's the kind of video gamey stuff that happens all the time, but it stands out as odd in a game that has such an emphasis on character behavior and relationships. Not every camp approaches social dynamics in a way the old camp does, but in the early parts of Gothic at least, you'll find a surprising wealth of these social lattices. Lots of early quests put your dedication to joining a camp in direct conflict with your relationship with a different camp, meaning choices can have pretty definitive outcomes depending on how you navigate. One quest had me chasing a guy out of town at the direction of a guard captain, only for another different guard to get mad at me because that person was his main source for smuggled goods.
I hope you're not planning to join our camp, because I'll be voting against you.
This sort of dynamic feeling social structure was always Gothic's best strength, and it goes untouched in the remake. That unfortunately also means that when the main story finally gets into full swing and the rote save the world tale spins up, the complete shift away from all this nuance makes the back half of this game comparatively boring. This is exacerbated by just how jarringly paced the quests in the final acts can be. So many of them require meeting the only guy who can help you do a thing, but proving your worth to that guy then means hunting X of a certain monster first. It feels like homework, not heroism.
That business in the swamp camp, now the mine flooding. It's been a mess.
It isn't to say that the parts that work are perfect anyway. You'll fight boredom throughout thanks to the uneven story pacing in every act, even with this remake's occasional attempts to smooth the transition between major plot points by changing a quest in key ways. Back to the old camp example, you can impress everyone you need to impress to get a meeting with Gomez, but you still can't actually do that until you hit level 5. Which means you may have to go out and grind or spend some time in other camps you don't intend to join just to find some way to get enough experience to meet this arbitrary goal. These gaps spent wandering around doing busy work were at least sometimes rewarded by small but neat discoveries in the wild early on, though those were mostly a new plot point that let you feel your way through the dense tapestry of the world some more. The remake does bring a wealth of new side quests that gives you many more opportunities to submerge into and affect the world in small ways. One that lets you get a measure of revenge on a jerk you meet very early on is among the best, but my favorite is easily when you learn the tricks to train your very own rideable scavenger bird. As a returning player, the process of discovering genuinely new things to do was just as pleasant as it was to see all the regular stuff the first time. Which is to say, it was often just as interesting and valuable as it was tedious. Gothic 1 Remake is undeniably the best way to play this cult classic RPG, and not just because it's an old game that has become hard to run on new PCs as time forgets it. The scope of the changes are largely quality of life improvements, making it easier to look at, listen to, and interact with on basic levels, even if it doesn't make for a bug-free experience. It's still one-dimensional combat, uneven pacing, and disappointingly dull second half aged like milk. Yet the earnest and ahead of its time world building remains a high watermark for the genre, feeling like a clever and fresh take even after all these years later, and it's bolstered by new side quests that only enhance it. For more, check out our reviews of 007 First Light and Mina the Hollow. And for everything else in the world of video games, stick with IGN.